So basically, we're gonna have him work more anyhow because of complexities with OPEB and things like that.
I think that, so we're in that 3-year contract. I think that FY19 is the last of that 3-year contract, and it went up some in anticipation. GASB knows what they're doing several years in advance. I think you're gonna see bigger increases in financial audits across the board. And Justine and Hingston, they're people that have, they've been around for a while. There are, bigger firms. Sometimes those bigger firms come with bigger prices too.
Is it the sort of thing that you will have to go out to bid?
They recommend actually that you do go out to bid, you look at changing it up at times. It's considered like a,
RFP.
It's
yeah.
it's a healthy thing to not
Yeah.
use the same auditor for a century.
Yeah. And they did that recently where they had someone else come in for 2 years. I think in FY14 and 15 is when they had that. So it hasn't been that long. There's also some benefit of having someone who knows the history of issues that have come up in the town in terms of, he has records on a betterment that happened at some point in Topsfield.
Can I ask, is this an hourly rate? They bring in X amount of hours to get out about $4,100?
No, part of that is the contract, and then there's $1,500 in there for additional services. And sometimes those additional services may be us hiring somebody else, in that, one of the things that the GASB did at 1.2 is that they made it very clear in terms of when they can help and assist and when they can't. Sometimes you have to hire another firm. If you're actually looking for help on how to do something, you have to hire another firm to come in and
Because then they're not auditing you. they're
Right,
helping
exactly,
you.
yeah.
It's
The
kinda-
conflict of interest laws
Right.
made it, distinguish how you use your auditors as well.
I apologize. I brought some handouts based on what I gave to the board last Monday, and I forgot to hand them out before we started our discussion. So I'll just circulate those if you want. Just to be clear, the town accountant has her own format and setup for all of her documents. This was merely an attempt by me to segregate the items from the existing budget documents so that I could have a very, so that I could have a discussion with the Board of Selectmen with respect to the items that they have specific legal authority over, being those boards or committees and departments that are under the authority of the Board of Selectmen. So this list that you see here is really just a picture in time for me to be able to discuss with the Board of Selectmen what I considered to be those items for which I was looking for some feedback from them. So I don't want to confuse the issue at all. This is really just my document for the board. This information may be, you may see it on your forms and in your spreadsheets that the town accountant has given to you, but this was really just for me to have a more narrow list of items for discussion with them. So we talked about the first and second one on this list. Number 3 and 4 is with respect to our town buildings. The utilities for electric and gas. We essentially made an assumption that when we move into the new town hall in 2019, that there will be an additional cost for utilities. We have no idea what exactly those will be. There's a few moving targets. First of all, we're going into a building that will have a completely new HVAC system. It'll be more insulated, better insulated, more a greener building, but we still needed to, much bigger. So the bottom line is that we're going from 8,200 square feet to 19,000 square feet, and we really don't know what that additional cost will be. So we made a conservative estimate that at the very least we should account for at least a 20% increase. This is really a moving target, but we thought that it was the responsible thing to do to identify the fact that we do need to put additional funding aside to make sure that we have money for this request. I would anticipate that by next year's special town meeting, we may have to look at this number again to make sure that, that we're within the right ballpark, because if not, we'll have to identify a potential transfer when we have more information about when we move into the building and what the actual bills will look like. But in the meantime, this is a moving target and an assumption that we should assume that we'll need at least 20% more in the FY18, well, in FY19 as compared to the FY18 budget.
And you're really only gonna be occupying for half
Half
of
the year,
fiscal 19,
correct.
so that gives you maybe a little wiggle room also.
Right.
Although, of course, it's heavy on the winter.
Winter months, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, this is really just, you know, just to get everybody on the same page so that next year we don't come in, there's no surprises. And we say, well, we didn't think about that. Right. So next, we've already talked about the town clerk, the elections, so we've already talked about 5, 6, 7, and 8. Unless you have any questions for me, I can just go to number 9.
And Jen
Actually,
talked
we
with
already
us
talked
about
about
9
that.
and 10,
Yeah.
and you just did too.
Yeah, and then number 11 then is animal control. This is for animal and boarding expenses. Here's another one. I mean, this is the complexity of, you know, we don't have a crystal ball. If we did, we could, you know, budget to the penny. The issue with this item is that we don't have any money right now. If our animal control officer picks up a stray on the side of the road that has no tags and isn't identified, we have to find a place to house that, to board that animal, and we have no budget to do that. And so this is, the animal control officer has suggested and has given us this amount of, this request, so that, in the case that this is necessary, there will be funding set aside so that she can pay, you know, someplace to board the animal. I see this as an essential expense, however, you know, we don't really know from any given point in time how many dogs will be picked up, who will not have owners, who will have tags, who won't.
Seems like an arbitrary number, $929.
I know.
It was
Like, how
a
do we come up
discussion
with
that I had with her to bring
Yeah.
the line at up to 1,500. And just to basically keep it that, it's based on the number of animals per year, and last year, so it was 500, and then with different 3% in given years, it had gone up to an odd number. So I just asked her to
So you're rounding it out.
level it to 1,500 per
Okay.
year. It's locked into, you know, a department with a single account that it can't be spent for anything else. And last year, she keeps, you know, records of any pickups that she does and where the animal goes and what the costs are. There was an animal that was, the cost that we received the invoice the end of June, and the cost was picked up by the Board of Health, and it just doesn't fit into the accounting standards that I'm used to have an expense changed to a different department at the last minute like that. So I'd like to have the expenses be able to stay in the department, but we were locked in because the encumbrances were already done. It wasn't June 29th, I'm sorry, it was July 29th, but it was a June bill.
Kelly, is it possible to have fees to defray those expenses, especially if it's a larger number?
She does have some
We
fees,
do.
but they go into the general fund. The law says that any revenue that's identified by law has to go into the general fund unless otherwise specified by a law. So it just is standard general fund revenue, unless you were to set up some type of revolving
But
account.
those fees are already in place, though.
Well, there's fees in place, and yeah, there's fines, and
How much of it's covered by those fees?
in these cases, it's usually none, it's usually an animal that needs to be put down. In this particular case, this dog, the owner, was basically giving up the dog, they couldn't afford to put the animal down, but the animal needed to be put down. It was a cost that got picked, that's how the Board of Health got involved.
Now, if a dog is picked up, if there's an owner, typically there will be fees involved and that would be used to offset the cost. But the animal control officer, because of the nature of the job 24/7, you know, you can't, you know, they need to bring a dog somewhere to be boarded, even if there's an identifiable owner. So really this provides a cushion so that there's at least a minimum amount,
Yeah.
$1,500 set aside for this expense. And God willing, we don't need it, it goes back into the general fund at the
Yeah,
end of
and
the
this
year.
isn't-
Restricted doggy daycare.
We'll bring them to Rowley.
This isn't to indicate that there's only 1 or 2 dogs picked up per year. She actually picks up more dogs, and at times has been able to in the past bring the dogs to her own home. She can't always do that depending on the nature of the dog too. So there's a lot of issues that come up when she's talking about this.
Yeah.
tends to be a lengthy conversation.
Yeah, and also, I mean, legally, she shouldn't be bringing the dog, like, there's a lot of liability involved if she does that, and so we're trying to avoid getting anybody, she shouldn't be bringing dogs back to her home, so we wanna make sure that we have an adequate cushion. I thought that $1,500 is more than sufficient to, protect the town in the case of, you know, an abandoned animal having to be boarded. So the next number 12 is with regard to streetlights. This seems like the other volatile number that seems to hit us every year at the last possible moment. And it seems that we've been under budgeted for this because it always seems like it happens right in June for reserve fund transfer time. So we're just
Is it more
requesting
copper plates, or more streetlights,
Just
or?
the expense has always been.
just the expense of the electricity supply for the streetlights. It's
Just turn 'em
not. Hey,
It's cheaper.
Yeah,
the
well,
light at the end of the tunnel
I
has
don't know.
been turned on
We
That-
did a
that was-
reserve fund transfer last year because
Yeah, I
National
think
Grid
you've
had
done
bumped the rate.
every 2 years.
This is one that I had
Years,
also
right?
requested that he put in this increase because the account is historically has been underfunded to, you know, in terms of looking at the last minute, we're struggling with if there's gonna be enough money to make it through. And he's paid it out of different accounts and I'm trying to stop that.
So why is that so difficult? We know
How many lights?
generally how many kilowatt hours we use on an annual basis. It's gotta be relatively consistent.
It seems like they changed the rates.
But the rate,
No, the rate-
no,
the
we
rate's
have a
different than the
contract
number
with the
of-
rate.
Amount of energy.
I'm just suggesting that we've been underfunded. I can ask the questions of David Bond.
He had I did ask him that and he had a reason, I just for life. can't
Yeah, I
remember what
know,
was.
it
I
was,
I talked to David about it.
Yeah.
We have
Oh, good.
120 lights, and there are only a few options. It's been talked about in the past, and due to public pushback, the lights were not turned off. And at some point, it becomes a safety issue, so those were the things that he was talking about. We talked about LED lights, and those are expensive to install up front, and people object to the bright blue light as opposed to the soft yellow light of
There's
incandescent.
one on Route 1 in Ipswich. that's
I'm sorry, is this for
annoying.
electricity or is this for the lamps?
These are for the street lights. These are like,
You
to
could
reduce
cut down
cost,
the
you can
cost
in
of
theory put in
electricity.
LED light bulbs at a time, but they're expensive up front.
did he mention like the rate structure, like when it seems like they always change the rates right before we're trying to close out the books.
He says he can't get a handle on the rates, and they're just always going up.
Right.
That's basically what it is.
No, maybe we can find out more about that. I thought we had a contract for electricity.
I don't think we're tied down to a specific rate, but I don't know.
Are we for town
Not,
buildings?
just for the buildings,
Yeah,
not
you
the
know,
streetlights.
nodding.
Why would we not cover that under
It's,
the?
we have a municipal, contract for buildings, but not for streetlights, it's a separate contract.
Yes, you agree. Okay. Well, it's too bad that National Grid won't just give us a constant rate. You know you've got the streetlights, you know how roughly modulo a really dark day where they come on automatically. National
Has there been any
Grid should-
discussion about, I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead.
I was gonna say, National Grid should just be happy they get the money and just
You can go,
leave
go
the
anywhere you
rate
want, pretty much.
fixed.
Is there a way to maybe turn the lights off earlier, on the back end of the evening, and just, shorten the duration that they're on? Have you talked about that maybe?
You know what, it sort of fell under my umbrella because it just is one of those things that doesn't really have an owner, except I would go to Dave for
Probably should
his
shop
feedback.
that rate around.
Dave's a pretty ingenious, I can't imagine that he hasn't tried to do whatever he can to lower this cost. I just think this is something that we're forced to pay for unless we wanna shut off lights and deal with the public repercussions of that.
Catherine might have an idea.
Aren't we a green community? And wouldn't there be an option for maybe a grant for LEDs?
LED, if people
That's
like
it,
the,
Bring that up with Dave.
if people don't mind the color of the LED one, which seemed to be the other objection.
Yeah, we could have the
Pretty
purple
soon,
at Christmas time.
The normal light bulbs, those
Everything's
things
showing
are,
LED.
yeah,
Everything's
in
showing LED.
15 years, they won't be able to get the normal light bulbs
Yeah.
anywhere,
Or-
right?
Yeah.
So
or
it's
the
already
Yeah,
hard
no,
to
John,
get.
John Spencer brought that up as well during the meeting, he said, can we find out? So I did tell the board that I would find out more information, but honestly, that was, our meeting was just on Monday, so I haven't even had a chance to talk to David, but between Lou and I, I'm sure we can corner them,
They gotta work on the color of those things.
I know, I know.
change them.
Well,
Cross
they
point.
have gotten better, the house ones,
That's true.
your indoor ones, so maybe they can do it for streetlights too.
So we'll look into that a little bit further. And on this list, the 13, number 13, I consider that legally mandatory in terms of the increase in the solid waste collection fee. This is year 6 of a 10-year contract. We've had the first 5 years at one rate, and now the next 5 years will be at the additional rate. So this is a contractual obligation. That's legally mandatory, so this is another one of those fees, I would never call it discretionary at this point, because we are obligated to that contract, so that was probably the last of the general fund requests that were above guidelines. There were 2 other ones on the list regarding the PEG and cable fund, and that's number 14 and 15 on my list. One is a one-time fee, one is a reoccurring fee. Number 14 represents a contractual increase in the annual operating expense to allow Boxford Cable Television to provide us with the cable services that they provide us with in order to televise, record meetings with, for the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, and miscellaneous events around town. Their rates have gone up slightly, approximately $2,000, so we're trying to increase that. And then also for a one-time fee of $3,000, we're gonna need their assistance with relocating all of the equipment into the new town hall and making sure that that's done correctly. So it's the additional time for
How much
that.
of them is that? I mean, I've seen it, it's,
Well, we're trying to move the hub back from Proctor to the new town hall. I'm not a cable expert, so I can only take their word for it. The additional person power that's necessary for them to assist us with that process. Otherwise, I would anticipate we'd have to hire someone from Comcast and Verizon to help us make those decisions. So this is really just them identifying to us what the additional charge will be for their assistance and the extra time. Because the contract that we have with them is just to provide the cable coverage, not to provide other ancillary services. And this sort of does go above and beyond. Now, the
you know, can we
money,
get some volunteers to move the stuff?
Excuse
I'll
me?
move the stuff.
what's that?
I'll move the stuff.
It's not the physical movement of the items so much as it is the design and the, how you move, what equipment where it will go in the new building. It's not,
That wasn't part of the plans for the town hall, the design of for telecommunications?
I've
cabling
been
and stuff?
sitting on some of those meetings, and some of this is part of the plans, and they do have people that are offering services as a volunteer basis, but this is above and beyond that. This is working directly with the cable company, but some of the supplies, the cameras that they'll be buying are potentially coming out of the town hall funds, the project.
Are there things that we just can't touch because they belong to the cable company? Or?
no, it's just above my pay grade.
This is coming out of the money
I
that
was-
Comcast and Verizon.
I was going to
have
state,
that
this is, it's on your cable bill each month.
We've already paid for it.
I don't know about the 3K one time, but.
Well, we've
Yeah,
we've
no, it is.
paid,
Say, oh, they
yeah.
does get reimbursed?
Yeah,
We have a fund right now for these expenses, and that's what this money is coming from.
Oh, gotcha.
it's
So-
gonna be
so
in
There's
the
nothing
Article
outside
2
of funds
transfers.
that can
I
come
gotcha, okay, gotcha.
So each month when you pay your cable bill,
Well, I know that
1.25%, and so we have a fund where we've been collecting that
But
between
I can also see why
Verizon.
they would apply it toward our normal operating weeks with them, but not for a one-time move cost. So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful, and I
Yeah,
think we're
it's
very
there.
fortunate to have the collaboration and partnership with them to do this, and I think it's not a forever deal either, so, you know, when they gave us a quote for it, I really had an obligation to bring that forward to the board and to you and explain what that cost is for. And that's a guesstimate, I mean, they aren't gonna charge us more than they need, but we wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate resources and that they need to be appropriated this year. Last year, if you recall, we might not have been having this conversation 2 years ago, because it was only last year that the state required that we set up a separate PEG cable access fund, or all of that funding would have gone to the general fund. And that would have left us with nothing, to run the project, to run the program, or to even relocate and to rebuy our new broadcasting system. That will be, I'll tell you a little bit about that in the capital requests. But the funding for this is fully self-funded through the separate cable fund.
It's a budget offset.
We'll do the transfer as part of Article 2.
Right.
So that was it for my list, unless there were any questions. Yeah, I did notice that I don't have anything on here from the COA, so I'll just
She
make
was
sure.
talking about a $400 increase in postage.
Yeah, so what I'll have to make sure that my list, I update my list for the board before I meet with them again with any COA items that I wasn't aware of. But again, this is just for me and the Board of Selectmen. I only give it to you as reference. We won't be updating necessarily. Everything that's on this list is already in Catherine's list, and we're gonna maintain that format. I just did this for my own purposes.
So maybe in 2 weeks when we're meeting, or certainly when we're meeting in March and talking about what do we wanna vote for budgets, we'll know what the selectmen want by then. What they're supporting and what they're not.
God willing, that's the plan. So, but that's also what I wanted to clarify with you tonight, how you see the process sort of rolling forward, because we've got, you have your base budget, you've had these requests, and depending on when you vote and what our next steps are, the town accountant will have to know when she would be when you take your votes, at what point she'll update her
Update the budget.
information
Yeah.
to come up with the version 2 of the budget. So it becomes, instead of budget request, then it becomes approved budgets
Approved
perhaps.
budgets. Yeah, and typically when we make those votes, we're doing it through March, always with the caveat that we can supersede it if something changes.
New information, yeah.
Kelly, I'm sorry, didn't you start though by saying that they basically are in favor of these items, except for 2 that you mentioned? The fire and the,
There's
And
there's
the clerk.
actually 4 items, right. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So one is selectmen special for 10,000, and then the second one is the 17,000 for town clerk, and then the other 2 are for the fire department. I think at the next meeting, we just need further discussion about those. They didn't need to take a formal vote, but they wanted to give you sort of an understanding of sort of where they stand right now on all the other items. Their inclination is to support all of them, except for those 4, they need further deliberation, and then perhaps at the next meeting. Would it be helpful if I had them take a formal vote on these items at this point for your sake, or is that premature at this point? Their next meeting is the 26th.
And that's when ours is,
Oh, okay.
so, and we won't, I think, be voting budgets on the 26th.
Okay.
Probably, we probably start doing that the next week, but we've often done it piecemeal, where we do the ones that are straightforward, and then we come back and revisit again and again.
Yeah.
The ones that are over guideline, and come to an understanding of, what's needed, what can we afford, what's needed, what can we afford, so.
Well, also framing that to them, like the way in which we frame that is, okay, all other things, do you recommend that these are wanted and recommended by the Board of Selectmen
Right,
to be voted by the FinCom?
whether
Or
we
not.
can afford it or not.
And that doesn't mean that all 4 or 5 members will vote for, but just to get a formal sense of them as the body, to make the recommendation so that you know where they stand with these, was my hope
It's always
in bringing it.
helpful, always helpful,
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right,
All right,
that was it for that one.
so that's all the operating budget pieces. Now you're talking capital, or should we just keep
Yeah,
going on
yeah,
this?
this is an overview. I wanted to provide you, this is page 2 of the handout that I gave. And I presented this to the board on Monday as a general overview of sort of what we're dealing with at this point in time. I'm trying to refine some information from a couple of vendors. I told the board that I can give a more detailed PowerPoint presentation at our next meeting on the 26th. And then I think that the following week after that, March 5th, I think, I'm not sure if you're meeting or not, but I'd be happy to come here and maybe do another presentation for your sake if you'd like. But this is really just to give you an idea of the FY19 requests and how I think that they might best fit within the guidelines that have been given to, to us. And I've gone a step further in the page 3 of this by fitting certain items into a very preliminary draft list of warrant articles. But if you want, I know that the first time I gave you an update of the capital budget articles, there was a significant number of items that have changed since last year's comprehensive capital budget we worked on that with the Collins Center. I mean, the major change this year, of course, is the fact that we have the MSBA school improvement project going on. There was some realignment and discussion with the school committee in regards to their capital requests. So on this list, you'll notice that there are no school department requests for capital for this year. They understand and recognize that, the MSBA project is a major investment in the school structure.
Have you talked to the schools in the last couple of weeks?
Well, the last couple of weeks I got a
You're
15.
referring to elementary, not Masco.
Oh, elementary, not Masco.
I'm talking about elementary.
Well, what they gave me
What
is
date
what's
did they give you
reflected
something?
here.
They had a meeting
At
on
least
the
2
day
weeks ago.
before the Super Bowl.
Oh, the Saturday?
Yeah, and it's,
I
have
and
it.
it's, and it's quite
Why?
different,
Really?
yeah. So,
Interesting.
I was pretty stern, well, I was more than stern at that meeting, so I don't know, we'll see where it goes, but
Was there capital discussed?
a ton,
Really?
For
For this year.
fiscal 19.
yes.
Bold,
Wow.
that's very bold.
Well,
You need to read Facebook this morning.
I'm
But,
too busy
but
working.
there's very
I don't
split,
get to
there's
hang
very
out on
split
Facebook.
very split opinions on that school committee.
Really? Okay.
And they've got another meeting coming up, I believe, tomorrow, and others on that, so.
Oh, okay. Well,
They don't have consensus on what they want to do, but there's a few that feel that a lot more capital should be had.
It was a very broad discussion.
Yeah.
We didn't really get into numbers at all, if I understand.
okay. Well, politics aside, what I have when I came up with this list is before you now, and I'll sort of walk you through it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Thank
So
you, I appreciate that.
They gave the superintendent's marching orders to come back with estimated figures on some of that stuff. So they haven't decided anything, but more homework's being done on what that is.
Right, okay. Well, I'm only one person making recommendations.
Correct, it's
and
just, there's, so
I
the smart
appreciate that.
boards, they were surprised that we're falling behind in smart boards compared to
Mhm.
Boxford and Middleton. And then the endpoint learning devices.
Mhm.
So the problem is, stuff needs to get replaced every X number of years. Anyway, it goes on and on and on, but.
Okay, well then I retract what I just said a few moments ago about
This was
the
one cut
understanding
at
and
it.
the, and the consensus that,
But they know the temperature of the town, and they know that, I was like, well, all the capital requests already came through, and you've given no capital requests, so we.
nothing,
Right, so
and I
that
was delightful.
That was articulated.
Yeah,
so.
okay. All right, well,
And the whole debate about what goes on the normal operating budget versus what is capital.
and
that
that
was
is an
discussed.
ongoing discussion.
Correct.
Which needs to be fleshed out,
Correct.
appropriately. So with what I knew on February 3rd, before the FinCom, before the school committee met, this is the list of items
I'm now
that-
seeing the February 3rd date on it.
It wasn't intentional, it's just the date that I was at work till 2 in the morning trying to come up with the list based on what I knew at that point in time. So let's start with and I'll just preface all of this again by saying once again that this is what I consider to be the FY19 capital budget requests. There are still some items that still need to be fleshed out in terms of, just as a quick start on the technology piece. There are 3 items here with relation to the technology for Town Hall telecommunication system. This is an item that, the phone system is just horrible, and I don't know any way to deal with that or to address that without making a proposal for a different telecommunications system. So this
Can we
is
check-
one of those items that needs further discussion
Can
and
we check
dialogue.
pricing for, the VoIP service ones?
We're using, okay, so let me,
Cause that you can get,
without an IT director on staff, I'm at a very limited capacity
Yeah.
to describe any of these projects in full detail at this point in time. Just
Yeah.
in full disclosure. This item, it can wait, honestly, it can wait, but it just means it's a question of if you're okay with having a horrible telecommunication system at Town Hall for another year,
But-
that's a policy decision that may need to be discussed.
When you reopen the town hall, the idea right now is to use the old phone system?
The existing phone system
That
is
hasn't
right
been ripped
now.
out during the construction?
Oh, no.
There, it's not, this
Oh, it's
isn't
the
the
one you
We're
got
not
in
wire.
the
talking
temp-
about wiring, we're talking about the actual phones and
Which you got over at the
the
new town
system.
hall. So in,
Yeah.
in designing the town hall, that it's
The
just a
wiring's
physical,
there.
yeah, I know, but it's just a
a
physical
great-
building, there's all the attachments to that
just-
building were not included in the town building project. They're all
Oh,
separate.
yeah.
So furniture and
the-
phones and all that stuff.
There were phones there, so you moved them back.
Right, we'll move back what we have now there, but I've identified that there is a need for us to address the lack of proper technology to meet our needs
Should we
with
not address that
respect to
when we
this.
go
Let me
back
ask you
to
a
the
question
town
on that.
We could.
So obviously, there will be many more offices in the town hall that will require new telephone instruments.
Right.
And you don't want to buy new instruments to an old system.
Right,
There won't be that many more,
Another 10,000
Desks.
feet.
yeah, but there's not that many more people who already had phones. Yeah,
We-
The Council of Aging will have phones.
they had at least
Right,
one,
they did.
maybe they'll have a second one.
so I'm going to pursue getting more information that I can discuss with the Board of Selectmen about the other options that are available. I know that the police and the fire have a different system than we currently have. And I understand that it's a big improvement over what we currently have, but anyway,
The school's got a new one too, in the not
Yeah,
too
they got-
distant past, right?
yeah.
Well, maybe actually it
The
is
current
a while
system
back.
isn't currently a lease system, it's, we bought it outright and we don't pay monthly for the lease or anything like that?
Oh, we pay monthly fees, yes, we do. But the initial
There's a maintenance
equipment,
fee probably.
we pay each month for
Because there was
the
a-
system. And every time we have to call to get anything addressed, it's an additional, it's like $75 an hour. I mean, even to change a message, it costs extra, it's
Yeah,
really
I think
horrible.
you need to explore that because I'm not sure if you probably went into a different system, it would not be that much more than you pay now.
Yeah,
Well, I just wanted to let you know that I'm getting more information on this particular item, but I want to identify it. And then the townwide enterprise content management system and the next one are very interconnected. We have gotten 2 quotes from 2 vendors. Our idea or the vision is that we would be able to digitize a lot of the paper records that currently exist in the town offices. Our vision was to start with the land use department so that, given that when we move into the new building, there will be a combined office space for Conservation Commission, Board of Health, and Building Inspection Services. That with those 3 departments, they currently each have their own separate set of records that may be completely duplication of, so the same records are being held in 3 different offices. So our hope was that if we could digitize those records, that we would not only be able to digitize them and make them available and accessible through one major system, that we'd be able to do that before we move back into the new building. So rather than bring 3 file cabinets of the same information to Town Hall, that we'd have the opportunity to digitize those, to consolidate those, and to make those available on an enterprise content management system. So these again are numbers that were quoted to us. I'll be providing more information to the select board. I'll also be talking with our, the informal members or our volunteers, telecommunications and communications volunteer. We have Bob Sundberg and also Robert, Bob Sapienza, wanted to talk with them about these items so that we can get a little bit more information with regard to future direction on these. So I'm identifying them because I don't want them to be a surprise when we get more information. Again, we're at a grave disadvantage not having an IT director or someone or a consultant to help us guide in these particular, technology-driven decisions. But I know that these are solutions that I know Boxford has recently done. They've worked with Enterprise Content Management System with General Code and Laserfiche to come up with an enterprise-wide system so that we could start to digitize and convert our paper records into an online format where people could generate their own public records. They could go in and search for public records that exist. We could digitize all of our maps. Right now, we do have some ability to do some of the digitized records and connecting them with Munis. However, the Munis piece, when you hear about Munis and permitting software, really the Munis piece will track the financial and accounting ability of the software so that when someone's applying for a permit, we'll capture certain information in that system, but it doesn't capture all of the records associated with that particular permit. So this is a separate item altogether. But I will get more information. Again, I'm just trying to identify what some of the requests are so that we can begin to formulate the final plan for the warrant.
The schools don't have an IT director, right?
They do, but it's mostly based on curriculum-based and using, it's.
Not something we could
it's-
borrow to help us
I know.
make good decisions here? We're gonna hire a consultant, have we talked about that?
I'm trying to use this limited pool of funds to get us the information, what we need. The IT director at the schools is not going to
You've
Yeah.
got,
provide this content.
Yeah,
Well,
question?
yeah, I just thought of two resources that might be helpful. The first one would be the Historical Society has gone through a big digitizing project. And the second one, it occurs to me that the CEO of EBSCO lives in Topsfield, and he might be a good resource.
if his name is Bob, he can be on the computer committee.
His name is Tim, and I know you know his parents.
Well, the only comment I would make is if we're gonna spend some money here without expertise, it's probably gonna cost us more than if we had the expertise in the first place. So that's
Mhm.
been my experience, so
So,
I think we ought to be thinking about that.
so there lies
Make those
the
decisions.
chicken or the egg. So,
Pay now or pay you later.
right,
Right.
so do I convert these into a consulting request? Or do we aim for products and services that have been tried out by other towns? This is the constant battle that I have with coming up with these. I can identify the need. I can't, I'm not an IT director.
You can't assess
I
whether this
can't.
is the right product to meet that
Well, I
need,
know that there are a
aside from
number of other
people's.
communities that have said, we've worked with them and they're doing a great, they provide a great product. At this point, I'm identifying a need and a potential cost. If we need more information, clearly, we're not gonna go to town meeting with a proposal that I can't defend. But I don't want there to be any surprises.
Is it,
We
is
have
it
a
a
need.
storage issue? Is that why we wanna digitize it?
It's a storage and an accessibility issue, yes. It's public records access.
Cause you almost have, well, yeah.
I mean, it's nice now to have the tax maps
Mhm.
online.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even if we started with the maps and getting those digitized, even that, we're talking a chunk of change, but.
Back to the phones, almost half that new building is an auditorium.
I don't
Because
think there are that many phones that we're looking at.
Because of the historical
It's
stamp,
just changing
right?
the
So
system.
it's all those square feet, but it's not all those square feet of offices because
And it's a little
our hands
more
were tied on what we
room.
could do with the space.
Yeah.
And then there's a connector space between what's elevators or stairways, right? So it's,
And it's more appropriate space for like the Council on Aging having a separate room to hold private conversations in.
How much funding do we get for the historical stand? Sorry.
That's long gone, John.
Didn't we have a time machine?
Unless you know Mr. Peabody.
I think the phone's the easiest one, because when you go to the vendors,
Yeah.
you're gonna
They
get
tell us.
consultation from
And
each
half
one
of
of
those-
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Half of those you know, like there's Ring Central and 8x8, and there's all those that
Right.
you can change the number that you have, and anyway, but
Yeah.
someone needs to go price it all out.
The next one's pretty easy, you've already heard of this one, the turnout gear, we applied for a grant last year, didn't get it. So this would be the second year of a 3-year phase-in for turnout gear that is in full compliance. So 40,000, I think, represents at least another 15 sets.
So one of the questions I thought of after the discussion with the police fire chief, excuse me, with the challenges they're having getting volunteers, getting people to participate, is this a safety issue or is this a want issue to replace the turnout gear? And then we have this.
She answered that, so,
Yeah, it's OSHA.
so they need 2 sets, and all of our old kits failed, almost, which is
They're-
kind of
they're
stunning
beyond-
that.
They're beyond date.
Yeah,
that
they're
they-
not OSHA compliant.
So what happens is that due to, they have to, they need the fresh set, so every time they use it, because of the gases that they're seeing when they actually wear them to something, they need to then wear the other set and then wash that first set. That's the new regulations. Something like that is what she said.
So everybody needs 2
So,
sets.
are there situations where they put on the kit, they just go down the street, nothing's on fire, and then do they have to wash it or need to, so that's the shades of gray. I've never been the fire liaison.
So I guess the question that I'm still confused on, and I missed that part, is 40 sets, how many sets are they buying?
I
No.
think they bought
They
16 this year, and
Yeah.
this is 15
So
sets.
everybody's got
Right.
one set that meets compliance, other than the chief's.
So do they have to be personalized? Everybody has a different set. You cannot,
I think
share
it's a fit
sets?
question.
well, maybe they might not fit perfectly. I mean, I'm just,
I seem to remember from the discussion years ago.
You have to get
If
the
you can
mask
ask
fit.
Jen,
Oh, well.
Yeah.
but I think it's a fit
Yeah.
question. It's,
but if you show up
We
once
should
a
ask her
year.
what the smallest number of these kits we need are, and that's supposed to have in the 3rd year of it.
So
maybe.
where I'm going with this, if you show up once or twice a year to a call, should you expect to have a
2
perfect
suits.
fit?
yeah.
Right, and
Well-
2 kits.
Or do you have to have one? Is it a safety? So if safety
Yeah.
is one, I'm not arguing that at all.
Yeah.
But if you're showing up a couple times a year so you can say I'm part of the fire department, and you get a size, I don't know, a 10 instead of an 11 or a 9, and it's a little loose or a little tight, can you live with that?
Well, I think Jen said that the people who don't show up often, she's prioritizing
I
the
know she's
people who show
prioritizing,
up.
but 40, how many sets are we talking about? 40?
They only have 15, and
Oh,
there's
it's
15 more.
15.
So it's
15.
30 total,
Okay.
Which is 15 people.
which is 15
there's
people. 6?
5 or 6 full-time people, including the chief,
5 plus the call,
and then the call
And the
on top
question-
of that.
So there's 10 of the top.
17 or so. I mean, I see this as a safety issue,
No, it's just the number of them that you get.
the
That's
number, and
question.
you know what,
How-
we fleshed
how
this
many
out
years?
last year, so, I mean, I'm assuming
Is that Che?
that,
Is Che this?
We have a different
It's Eric.
Yeah.
So
Just
you
phone,
can-
just call
oh,
her.
no,
Talk
she
with
worked
Jen.
on the
Okay.
proposal last year.
You don't know the answer?
You can talk with Jen and maybe get better numbers of,
Yeah.
okay, there's full-time people, there's
I know we went
frequent
through it
call
last year.
people,
Yeah.
and then there's not so frequent call people.
And I'm not suggesting anything to impair safety at all.
Oh, right.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think I think we're responsible at least to ask those questions.
Oh, yeah.
And if she comes
Yeah.
back and says, no, we need to have these, understood, because she's the expert on that, but she says, well,
She has, or I wouldn't be throwing myself at your mercy, saying this is what we need, trying to spend
Yeah.
taxpayer dollars.
I remember last year
I'll
going
close
through
the loop
this,
for that.
but I can't remember the.
Yeah.
I'll close the loop for that.
Okay. Police department tasers, safety trailer, these are 2 expenses that I believe we could easily fund with our turnbacks from the at the special town meeting during our Maya Safety Fund, what we've traditionally called it. So I'm not quite sure your position on whether or not you wanna keep this in the list, you want me, but what I've done is I effectively think that this amount of money, so we're talking about $9,000 for tasers, that would allow the department, everyone in the police department to have a taser. And then the safety trailer supplies and equipment, the police chief can speak to this more, but we have this safety trailer that has nothing in it. We got it as a grant and it's been sitting there. I think they store bikes in it, and during especially the fair, I think is when I had mentioned, I said, we got this trailer, I mean, isn't there anything in it where we're usually borrowing traffic and safety cones and all notices and signage from all these other entities around the state, which we can continue to do. But I suggested that the chief would give me some estimate of what it would cost to actually outfit it with traffic safety supplies and equipment that could be in there, so that we could have it for traffic safety events, even if it's, you know, so that the town wouldn't be necessarily relying on everyone else to provide the equipment for the trucks. So we could also be looking, and I'll probably pursue doing any type of grant with Maya to do this, but again, I thought that I should at least identify it as a safety-related expense that could be dedicated for FY18 Maya credits or surplus. And so what that money represents is the funding. So we traditionally in our FY18 budget will base our insurance budget on what has been quoted to us. And throughout the year, we get certain discounts for attending trainings, for going to or paying either early payment discounts. At the January meeting, there was a discussion that they'll be returning, they give a certain percentage of credits to communities that have been members for so long. So throughout the year, we get these credits, and at the end of the year, we effectively have a surplus. And so what I have traditionally tried to do is to tie using maybe that surplus during the special town meeting, to use that revenue towards items that are specifically safety related, that will mitigate risk or will potentially help to improve safety either with residents or with our employees. And it seemed to me that this sort of fit in that category. I was thinking of, you know, before the Topsfield Fair, before you even get to the fairgrounds, where we have the railroad crossings or the rail trail crossings, there really didn't seem to be a lot of signage leading up to that rail trail crossing across the major street. I just remember thinking to myself, it's really, you know, by the time you get over the hill and the lights and you're coming down, I could see where there could be, you know, potential for an accident, and I just thought if there were more signage or cones or some sort of signage or equipment, that might help to relieve the risk of, you know, for pedestrians or bicyclists crossing there. So I just gotten the idea at that point, and I said, you know, what do we have to do to get something in that trailer so that we can have more visibility at those sites and at those crossings? And the chief suggested that this might be a way, if we had any safety money available through Maya, that we could utilize some of that funding. I put 10,000 here, that's on the high end, we could probably get that down another 1,000, based on the itemized list that he has. He's put together a list, and, but we used 10,000 as the number just so that we could get something on paper. But I would recommend that if we're in favor of supporting these, that we could easily cover these with any surplus during the special town meeting as a transfer in relation to the Maya Safety Fund.
These are items that you can buy fairly quickly.
Oh, that was the other
So that you
reason.
can get them delivered by, or at
Right.
least
May
purchased.
2nd, you could call up and say, we got the approval, can we get them, and then the money's off the books by the end of by the close of the fiscal year.
Are the surplus funds available for any other one-time purchases, like software or anything else the police department might need?
Yes, but at this point in time, we don't know exactly how much we're talking about, but I also have another item on the list that I was going to suggest we use for those excess appropriations, if you will. So to answer your question, yes, and that's usually what we usually do with the special town meeting transfers as you get closer to town meeting, is identify where those excess appropriations might be. And then I think as a matter of this process in this committee, we'll usually talk about if there's ways that you can move items that are on the FY19 list, perhaps to the FY18 list, so that's a typical part of our procedure as well. And we always look at that as a part of, trying to get us a little bit better off when we go to town meeting for the FY19 budget. Okay, so here's the highway sander, snowplow, sander, whatever. It has so many different purposes that I lose track of which one it actually is. Originally on this list was an item, the front end loader was on this list, and that was for $150,000 purchase price. Since the first time that you saw this list, we actually had our sander catch fire, done, charbroiled. Yeah, the only thing they could salvage from it was the actual sander, the body of the sander. So since then, what I talked with Dave, we decided that we would take the front end loader off of the list. We would replace it with this item. The purchase price for this item is $145,000.
The insurance proceeds covering all?
Nope. Nope, too old. As a policy, they do not cover any equipment this old, they never do replacement value. So the only amount of money we're getting back from insurance proceeds on this loss is gonna be $33,000. So if it's $145,000 and you subtract the $33,000, we're left with $112,000. Now, our town accountant has done a great job of itemizing and telling and identifying a number of ATM warrant articles from previous years that either have remaining funds left in them, or that they have, when we're trying to close those out. So we want to try to close those out, and I think that they total about $60,000? So two things. Number one is we have identified about $60,000 in excess ATM warrant articles that needs to be closed out. And that's probably about 12 items or so.
Yeah.
So that could represent about $60,000 towards this cost. One other key piece of information that's important for us to know is that to order a piece of equipment of this size, that the fact that we need it for our snow removal is really important that we get a head start on the ordering, because you have to order the chassis first and then you outfit it later. So David has asked if we could consider putting this on the special town meeting warrant so that we can get at least 2 months ahead of the ordering curve by putting it on special town meeting and doing transfers to cover that. And so what I thought we could do, or what I would recommend potentially, is that we would take during special town meeting, we could do the appropriation for the 145 minus the 33,000 in insurance proceeds, and then apply the 60,000 in turnbacks from other ATM warrant articles.
Is there only plows? Can't be all plows.
No, we have more.
That would be a
three.
separate warrant article, right?
Yeah.
To transfer
We had
those
4.
12 items.
Well, that would be one warrant article, so we would be accepting them and then reappropriating them. Is that?
Well, you would have
We have to
one article.
rescind?
I think you have to have one article that just says, of these 12 items,
Yeah,
we're gonna transfer the excess funding
and
to,
to pay for this,
Yeah.
to fund this.
yeah.
And it sort of cleans everything up by taking all of those 12 articles, and just applying it towards the purchase price of this. That leaves us with $52,000 that we have to find in other excess
You have
appropriations from
those 12
FY18.
items clearly identified.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I've already sort of got a list of those items, and we'll start drafting something that we could, present to you as the next edition of a draft warrant for the town meeting. So that leaves about $52,000. I believe that between our other funds, we'll be able to identify excess appropriations that would allow us to purchase this vehicle during the special town meeting warrant, thus taking it off of an FY19 capital list. I think that that's realistic and that we could easily do that. One other potential source of funding to come up with this $52,000, last year, after the budget was approved, but before we actually had to pay the insurance, the police, the injured on duty, no, not injured on duty, yes, it's our injured on duty police and fire policy. It's managed by Maya, but it's actually covered by an outside Chubb agency. We were able to renegotiate and do an RFP, and we were able to save $35,000 off of our FY18 renewal. So that represents a portion of some of the excess appropriations that we could apply to this particular expense. So that I know of is one specific area where we would have an excess appropriation that could be applied to this for this expense. In addition to that, we'd be working with the finance team just to be able to identify any of those expenses. I feel comfortable saying that we could pay for this at the special town meeting with transfers.
Are the Maya surplus credits available for any safety equipment, or is it just police safety equipment?
Oh, no, it's for any safety equipment, but we've done a really good job at trying to get ahead of, every year we've tried to, use some of those funds for safety. Is there another safety-related?
Well, I don't know, I was just thinking
Expense,
if we
the
had
turnout gear.
$19,000 available from the Maya credits, and this is a one-time purchase, that seemed like a good fit.
Yeah,
Safe roads.
Safe roads, yeah.
yeah.
I did talk to David about this, and we had 4 vehicles, we only have 3 now. And basically the difference is, when the whole fleet's out, it takes, when the whole fleet of 4 vehicles out, it takes 4 hours to finish the job. The whole fleet of 3 vehicles out takes about 6 hours to finish, so that's the difference in time, and there is some safety issue in being able to get out and get all the roads sanded and salted and plowed, so, whether, if that's a policy decision, if it's, someone wants to consider that, but that's the difference, but David was strongly of the opinion that we need 4. We've always had 4, and that we need 4.
We're not getting less roads to plow.
The final 2 items on this list is, one with a finite amount is the Hearst House exterior maintenance and repairs. I say maintenance, but it's really, at this point, I say it's repairs. I've seen some pictures of this building and it's in bad shape. If we don't do some painting and scraping and do some repairs to the building, then it will eventually just fall down to the
This is
ground.
at the main cemetery.
Yes, yeah. So, this is, we guessed that this would cost, the request was for $25,000. The idea was that this year it would be a request of capital general fund, somehow general fund or free cash. They see this as a one-time expense, but that the interior work on this would be either met by the cemetery or partially funded through the cemetery and Parks trust funds. I'm trying to get more information from Steve and from the commissioners so that I have a better idea of how that split might best work. I also suggested to him that, if it's possible that maybe they were to pitch in something for the exterior work, and then next year we could, the general fund could cover maybe a portion of the interior work, that we might be able to get this $25,000 down a little bit so that it fits our capital spending plan a little bit easier. So I'm looking into that a little further. And then the final amount, this really becomes the rounding figure. This is the townwide facilities maintenance and repair fund. Actually, again, I don't know if maintenance is the right word. I know that Selectman Spencer, had a personal objection to putting maintenance expenses into the capital plan. And I know that that's a policy discussion that we have yet to really flesh out. The bottom line is the money has to come from somewhere, whether it comes from the capital fund or the operating budget. The bottom line is that we need to make sure that we have money set aside so that during the year, when we don't have the luxury of calling a special town meeting when a furnace blows or if something breaks, that we have money set aside to deal with the items that come up throughout the year that can't wait for special or an annual town meeting. And so I will show you in the next time in my PowerPoint some of the things that we've done with this money, with these funds,
Isn't that
for the past
unforeseen though?
few
Doesn't that come
years.
from our reserve account?
Well, we could, except we've got $100,000.
Right.
Are you referencing capital replacement, so if a boiler blows up, you gotta replace it, that's a capital.
Or,
Repairing it is not, that's not ready.
you know, right now, every year you voted a separate warrant article for facilities repair, and that's really helped us to stay ahead of the curve. If there is something that is maintenance related and we wanna fix it before it turns into a repair, we're able to utilize that funding for that. We've done a lot of upkeep with